sensory overload is something that occurs with a lot of autistic people, and I want to go over quickly how it can happen and why sometimes people get it and why sometimes the same person doesn't, or other people get it in so many different ways, and how it's not just simply an overload. Well, the first component that goes into sensory overload is magnitude. And sometimes when something is too much, you don't think straight or can't comprehend it. It's like if you look at it's like if you look at too bright of a light, like the sun or headlights coming at you. Yes, there's more light, but you can't see better because there's just way too much hitting you. But for some people, they can have the same thing with sound, like me, or with other people. I mean, with other senses. It can be with touch, which can also happen with me. It can be with dehydration, hunger. It can be any sense. It can be so much that it just overloads you and you no longer can comprehend actually what's going on. Another thing is, not only is it too much, but the complexity. And the complexity is very important because, let's say, if you have 1,000 people talking at once, even though they might not be talking loudly, you might not be able to comprehend all of them. If you look at a page and you just try to read the page all at once, you cannot read it at once. You have to do it step by step, letter by letter, word by word. Too much things happening at once, and the more complex it is, the harder for your brain to figure it out, and this can overwhelm you. There's also, I forgot to put on this list, the stuff that is, these two things can interact, but also there's certain things that are more attention drawing than other things, such as music can be especially overwhelming because you have complexity and you have magnitude, but also music just naturally takes you in more than other sounds, especially rhythmic music or beats. Music wants to make you move or dance, so it can be a lot more overwhelming. So certain things your body's already strongly affected in your mind because of how evolution or genetics. Beyond that is your other senses. A person is more likely to get overwhelmed when they're already overwhelmed with other senses as a final straw. So if a person is in a lot of, if I'm loud, bright lights might bother me more when there's loud music, or vice versa, because I'm already almost at my limit with one thing. It's just the other thing pushes off. And you might not always see it because it might be some sense that you do not understand. The reason why you might not understand the sense is it might be something like touch. It might be internal hunger. It might be it might be something internal like hunger or thirst or anything. It could be something that you don't notice because this person just notices more stuff around them. Like they might notice sounds that you do not notice. They might notice lights and stuff. They maybe have a different focus, so they're looking at something very distracting, but you're looking at something not, because it's just where your eyes are. Other senses. It could also be your mood. Sometimes people have more energy than other ones, and this mood could be affected. It could be health. Other things is sometimes when you're more tired or less tired, you're more sensitive to stuff. I get more sensitive to light when I'm more tired and noises, but I get less sensitive to unhunger, but get less sensitive to pain in general when I'm more tired. It could also be where your focus is. That person wasn't overwhelmed by that because they weren't paying attention to that, or they were in a different world, and now once they start looking at it, they get overwhelmed by it. It could be how you think. So I think very much through tactile, haptics, so touch, feelings, warmth, pressure, stuff like that. So I really do not like it when stuff unexpectedly touches me because it really bothers me. But other people are not sensitive to that at all, and some people think much more visually and they get overwhelmed by bright lights. Some people don't think visually, so they either get more overwhelmed because they don't think that way or that they just ignore it. So it could do a lot with their thought process. Also, I forgot to mention how there could be health problems like I have migraines and then I become more sensitive to light. Finally, for a lot of times in a lot of scenarios, the actual cause is simply unknown, or it's a really complex mixture of all these things going on. But whenever somebody gets sensory overwhelmed, and sometimes or not other times, it's important to note that the reason why this might happen is simply you do not know. Now, figuring out why it happened to yourself or other people might be useful to prevent it in the future, but it shouldn't cause you to doubt the situation. It should not cause you to not think about it or doubt yourself. And you shouldn't spend too much time figuring out it that you start denying it or you can't move on to your life. Either way, how does an overload also affect a person can be very different. Some people go into a state of almost shock where they just are quiet and numb and stuff, and you might not notice that because they're just sitting there with a blank expression. You might even think in some cases they're paying attention more, because instead of being rowdy and jumping up and down, they're just with a blank stare at it, which happens to me when I get overloaded. People think I'm paying attention more or that I'm with it, but really it's just that I'm so overloaded I can't respond and I can't think by my movements, or I don't have as much energy. Other times people burst in energetic ways. They start crying, or they run away, or they hide, or they visibly look upset or agitated or anxious. And sometimes they can go from one to another one. Usually with me, what happens is when I'm overloaded in some way, I first I feel nothing and I get very quiet, but then the energy built in because I haven't moved enough, and suddenly I'll burst out and I'll start running around, or I'm trying to hold back my overwhelm, and eventually it will burst and I'll start moving around a lot more. Some people, they move, then I would, once I get a lot of energy out, I quiet down for periods of time, then I get that energy built up again, and then I'm moving a bunch around it again. And people can go back and forth, and how they react also can be depending on a multitude of factors. It can be depending on how much energy they had beforehand and how tired they were, or it can be depending on the exact type of overwhelming. Like music was more likely to make me more hyper overwhelmed because of the beats making me want to move and the things. Well, bright lights just are more likely to put me in shock, like a deer in a headlight, or migraine, because it just drains my energy out of me. For other people, it's different, and that's also some important knowledge. For every autistic or neurodivergent person, what overwhelms them and how is different. I was watching a channel by Princess Aspian, who appeared also in a very good movie, Jeremy the Dud, and she was talking about how she loves to go to rock concerts and stuff, which I would personally hate because it's so overwhelming. But she also talked about getting overwhelmed by other sensory issues with touches and bright lights in a different environment. But rock concerts for some reason don't overwhelm her. And also what overwhelms people, and also I forgot to mention, your senses are not just your senses of hearing and touch and stuff, or your internal senses, but there's also breakdowns of your senses, and different people have different ways of doing that. So I can't identify faces and social cues very well, and directions. So when I'm in a place with a lot of human beings, it's much more overwhelming visually, because I am trying to identify every single person's face and I can't turn it off. That's something about the autistic mind, and a lot of ADHD minds, is we can't easily turn off our minds or just cut out stuff. Everything comes together, all of our senses, all of our feelings, and because they're not separated, we can do much more sometimes when we're not overwhelmed and when not pathways, and we can see connections between stuff better. But when we're overwhelmed, we're completely shut down. If you're overwhelmed with one aspect, it's not going to shut down everything else. If you're overwhelmed socially by someone's face, you still might know that you need to pee in the bathroom, when an autistic person might not. Again, every autistic person is different, but with my facial ability, airports and directions, airports overwhelming more, and facial is part of your senses. It's like a subset of your sense of sight, because you have a specific brain region that works for that. Well, thank you very much. I hope you found this interesting. Please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. And also, leave a comment in the comment section below if you have any ideas for future videos, criticism, or questions. And also feel free to DM me. Thank you very much again, and goodbye.